Phew! My goodness, that game was way too close for comfort, way too closer than it should have been, way too close for my liking. But first and foremost, we gotta give it up for the Warriors because they pulled it out. This game right here was an absolutely must win for the Warriors if they wanted to try to do anything serious this season in terms of being a playoff team, and not only being a playoff team, but hopefully finding a way to get home court advantage instead of being in the play-in situation. And the difference between winning tonight's game and losing tonight's game would be literally the difference between being a playoff team versus a play-in team. Yes, they were in the 5th seed going into this game, but the Grizzlies won their game and the Timberwolves won their game, and they are tailing the Warriors. And if the Warriors ended up losing this game, then they would have ended up being tied for the 8th seed. Instead, they were able to come away with a really difficult win on the road against the Lakers, and we can proudly say that they're still sitting in that 5th seed, and now they're just one game back from the Lakers for that 4th seed. Hello friends, so much to get to in this video. All the nuances, we'll get to it step by step. But before we do, first and foremost, I just want to thank you guys so much for getting me to 10,000 subscribers. That's a milestone. I am honored that 10,000 people have subscribed to this channel, and you guys persistently look for my content and support what I do, support my passion and love for this team, and willing to say all the good things and the bad things to ensure that the Warriors are able to find a way to maximize what they have so that they can go and try to gun for that 5th title in the Steph Curry era. I'm honored to have your attention. I'm honored to have you guys on board, and I will continue to do my absolute best to provide you with the best Warriors content on the planet. Having said that, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and that like button so that this video gets out to all the Warriors fans out there. Now, let's get straight to it. I'm going to start this out by pointing out all the positives, and then we'll go through all the issues that they had that they need to clean up on and they need to shore up on. First and foremost, the story of the first half were Brandin Podziemski and Jonathan Kuminga. Can't say I saw that one coming, but Brandin Podziemski was incredible in the first half of this game. He scored 22 points and was leading the Warriors in scoring. Podz shot 8 of 11 from the field, hit 6 of his 7 3-point attempts. He even grabbed 6 rebounds at the half. That is pretty incredible. I mean, he was really on a heater. He was just feeling comfortable out there, hitting 3-point shots from the get-go, from the jump. And he got comfortable out there, and he's attacking the basket, and he's hitting runners, and he's hitting floaters. Easily the best half of his career. Yeah, there was one particular sequence late in that second quarter where he attacks on the drive, hits the floater, and then gets back on defense, gets a hand on a pass, and steals the ball in transition. The ball finds him, and he takes a Steph Curry heat check from the 3-point line with nobody else back on offense. And he drills it. I mean, it's a little early in his career to be taking shots like that as a second-year player, but they did get the steal because of him, and he was on a heater, so the heat check went up and it went down. And then to end the second quarter, he throws a runner from the logo and hits a 3-point shot to end the half. That is absolutely huge. That is absolutely incredible. And at the very least, that is very Jordan Poole-esque. And from a scoring standpoint, that's a major compliment to Podz. And then there was Jonathan Kuminga in that first half. Kuminga actually led the team in plus minus in that half, plus 11, scored 10 points on 4 of 5 shooting, and more importantly, grabbed 6 rebounds and was able to play connected basketball. Steve Kerr actually put out a lot of different lineups, including Jonathan Kuminga in this first half. And the one that I fear the most, and you guys know this, is the one where Jonathan Kuminga, Buddy Hield, and Quinton Post are on the floor at the same time. I just don't trust that lineup to be consistent from a defensive standpoint. But tonight, they were able to hold up. I'm basically holding my breath when those lineups are out there. And I'm not quite sure why those lineups have to be out there because, again, in the second half of the game, Steve put Kevon Looney, to begin the third quarter as his first center off the bench rather than Quinton Post. And that's what he should be doing moving forward, because Quinton Post is really starting to slow down. And God bless him, it's not for a lack of trying. There really is a competitor in Quinton Post. It's just that he has limitations in terms of strength, in terms of mobility. Like if he's getting out to a three-point shooter, forget about it. He's done. He's not going to be able to recover on that shooter. He's not really going to be able to contest. And if it's a fake, it's over. There's no recovering there whatsoever. The Warriors are going to be stuck playing 4-on-5. And from a shooting standpoint as well, he's been struggling for like the last 5 games. Maybe a rookie wall, maybe fatigue. Like I said in the previous video, he said himself that he's never shot so many threes in his life, and he's starting to feel that fatigue. And I don't know if that fatigue is continuing game by game, but he is in the scouting report now. Teams are aware that he can shoot, so they are closing out on him better. And if they're able to close out on him and stop him from shooting the ball, it's kind of over from there. Post doesn't really have enough of a game to be able to take advantage of a pump fake from out there to create something else for himself. So once they run him off that line, the play basically ends up resetting for the Warriors. So if he's no longer impacting the Warriors in terms of his shooting ability, then he's more of a liability out there. But again, he did the best that he could. There were some good plays, there were some bad plays, but ultimately he wasn't overly detrimental from a defensive standpoint in this game. Now the Warriors had some serious scares in this game, both with Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler. As you guys saw, Steph Curry took that fall in that first half on that tailbone again, that pelvic injury that he miraculously got away with in terms of the seriousness of that injury. I mean, you guys remember how hard that initial fall was when he initially got injured. I mean, he could have been out for a month for all we know, and yet he's already playing. And you can see that he's got like cushion behind there to brace some of the falls that he may have to deal with. And he fell twice basically in the same possession late in that second quarter. And you saw him kind of writhing in pain a little bit there. But again, thank God he came back and provided the team with a light 37 points and 6 assists. And man, the Lakers were hammering him, and he was actually able to draw some calls and draw fouls, and he actually got to the line 14 times. Man, 37 points in 34 minutes of play for Steph Curry. It is just simply unreal what he's doing at the age of 37. It just doesn't make any sense. No other point guard in the history of the NBA has been able to play at this level, at this age, at this size. And then we had the Jimmy Butler scare late in that third quarter. He had to go to the locker room because he had an issue with his left forearm or hand somewhere in this area, and he had to go back to the locker room. He was missing for the remainder of that third quarter. And man, honestly, I was just doing a whole lot of this throughout the course of this game because of all these injuries and to their most important players. But Jimmy ended up being okay. He came back in that fourth quarter. And Butler didn't necessarily do a whole lot from a stat sheet standpoint, but he stayed glued and connected throughout the course of this game and hit the big ones that he needed to hit. Like if you guys remember in that fourth quarter, he hit a 3-point shot. With the shot clock running out, the Warriors had nothing going. Draymond throws him a pass in the corner and he just throws a bailout shot and hits that 3-point shot of all shots. Yeah, when the Warriors need a steady play, Jimmy Butler shines and comes through. And late in that fourth quarter as well, when the Warriors need a bucket, he is able to draw a foul and get to the free throw line. And that is just huge for the Warriors because number one, he's super reliable in terms of making his free throws, number one. Number two, to be able to draw fouls and get to the free throw line and get free points in crunch time with the game in balance, that is a super underrated ability. And man, Draymond Green was just a mixed bag of good and bad in this one. Sometimes you just watch him throw these passes and you're just like, what in the world are you doing? You know, half these passes that he throws to Jimmy Butler, I don't even know how Butler catches them. Like, you just throw it in his radius and he'll find a way to get it, which is amazing. Another underrated factor of Jimmy Butler and his ability to avoid turnovers. But Draymond Green's passing really needs to become more steady because he's just all over the map. 5 turnovers tonight, 5 assists, a 1-to-1 turnover ratio. That is a no-no. And offensively, he was all over the map, very inefficient, 3 of 9 from the field, 0 for 2 from the free throw line. You gotta realize that Draymond is the center of the Warriors. He's the starting center for this team, and you just can't have that kind of production from your center spot. And that made the game a little more difficult for the Warriors at times. But at the same time, defensively, mostly, he was very connected, and he got a very clutch stop against LeBron James late in that fourth quarter. And his overall IQ and understanding of defense, rotations, understanding switches, understanding plays that's going to happen before it happens. There was one particular play where I believe it happened in the first half of the game. He was playing with that Jimmy Butler-centric lineup. Quinton Post was out there. And Austin Reaves was essentially trying to get a switch against Quinton Post out at the three-point line. Recognizing what the Lakers were trying to do, Quinton Post called Post away from his man to get out to the corner so that Draymond would end up being the switch man instead. And he does, in fact, end up getting switched onto Austin Reaves and does an amazing job at contesting so that Reaves ends up breaking the three-point shot. I believe that play happened at the end of the first quarter, actually. And these subtle nuances absolutely matter. These nuances are the differences between a championship caliber team, a playoff caliber team, and a non-playoff caliber team. And I guess you could say something like a borderline playoff team at best, this kind of thing. There's different levels of plays, right, for any given team. And those nuances and understandings of the game in different segments in each quarter is going to determine the margin of error, and that's going to determine the viability of your team from an overall standpoint. And since we're still on the feel-good stuff, let me show you this clip of Jimmy Butler and Guy Santos before the game started, where Guy is doing his soccer stuff because, you know, South Americans absolutely love their soccer, right? And he's doing his soccer stuff and doing his routine, I guess, getting into a shot or whatever, and Jimmy Butler just takes the ball away from him and throws it away. And these are the kind of vibes that you love to see on this team. Okay, now, let's get to some of the issues the Warriors had. That starting unit is going to have problems against legitimate playoff teams with size. I feel like I have to talk about this almost every single game, where the Warriors would be so much better and they would reach a new level if their defense was stronger with more regular size. I mean, to start this game, they allowed 17 points in the first 5 minutes of the game. That starting unit just isn't good enough from a size standpoint alone. They can't cover the basics of grabbing a rebound. The Lakers grabbed 6 offensive rebounds in the first 7 minutes of the game. That is an unacceptable rate of allowing offensive rebounds to the other team to begin a game. And you're just allowing the other team a whole bunch of second chance opportunities. And the only reason this didn't get out of hand from the jump is because Podz was on absolute fire to begin the game, and he was able to somewhat match the rate of offense that the Lakers starting lineup was playing. And everybody can say all they want about how, oh, the starting lineup is now 13-0 with this iteration. What people don't consider is the possibility that they could be using a different starting lineup and still have that record with a more dominant margin of victory. So what the Warriors are doing now, essentially, to me, is that they are playing like a playoff team rather than a championship caliber team. A championship caliber team doesn't get out to these kinds of starts where you're allowing the other team to grab offensive rebounds left and right and getting out to these terrible starts that they'll have to compensate for throughout the course of the game. I mean, there just shouldn't be mismatches across the board to start a game and everybody has to double team and all this crazy stuff and the other team is just getting wide open looks. That is not championship caliber. Again, that starting lineup is good enough to make the Warriors a playoff caliber team, not necessarily a championship caliber team. And this is not the lineup that they're gonna want to use come playoffs against most of their competition. I just don't believe it. I think they're gonna end up having to adjust in the playoffs because they refuse to make those adjustments right now. And what's gonna happen tomorrow on the back-to-back, on the second end of a back-to-back against a huge Nuggets team when the Warriors are playing a tiny lineup and they can't stop anybody. And then you have Draymond Green on Nikola Jokic from the jump. And what if he gets into foul trouble? I mean, these are just the type of situations that the Warriors don't need to get into. They're actively making it harder on themselves than necessary. And it was no different in the second half of this game. The Lakers once again get out to a better start than the Warriors. They get out to a 15-11 start. So essentially that starting unit for the Warriors against the starting unit of the Lakers ended up being a -9 overall. That is why if you look at the end stat sheet, 3 of the 5 in the starting lineup were a negative. This situation has to be addressed if the Warriors want to try to contend for a title this year. I just don't know when they're going to do it. I hope they do it tomorrow, because if they run this starting lineup against that starting lineup against the Nuggets, good luck, man. You're going to get out to a deficit. As for the second half of the game, like I said, the starters got out to a poor start once again against the bigger Lakers unit. But again, in the second half, Kevon Looney was the first center off the bench rather than Quinton Post. And I'm just not understanding why that's not the case in the first half as well. Why you have to make this adjustment in the second half instead of just doing that from the get-go. Where the Warriors are simply going to be better off, especially with Jonathan Kuminga on the floor. He plays a lot better with Kevon Looney next to him than Quinton Post. Plain and simple. Kuminga and Post are like -20 and worse than that when they're on the floor together. Whereas Looney is the second best player next to Kuminga overall on this team. And that's been the case throughout the course of the season. But yes, you won't see it in the stat sheet for this one. And Kevon was essentially a net neutral in this game in the 8 minutes that he played. But a lot of things that don't show up on the stat sheet happen when guys like Kevon Looney and Guy Santos are on the floor. And honestly, against a team like the Lakers, I feel like Trace fits much better than Kevon Looney does. There are certain teams where Trace would be more useful than Kevon Looney. And then there are other teams where Kevon Looney would be more useful than Trace. By the way, let's get back to Kuminga for a second here. Because obviously, he changes a lot of things for this team with his presence. And you guys know how I feel about Kuminga in general. But for the most part, in this game, he did a lot of good things. You know, he had 1 block in this game. And there's context to stats sometimes. You know, it was a play where Guy Santos had to recover on, I believe, Rui Hachimura, and Rui's attacking the basket, and Guy Santos is kind of staying connected to him, but is kind of getting beat at the same time, and that's where the help comes into play, and Kuminga ended up being there, and he was able to block Rui Hachimura at the rim. And if he's able to create more plays like that from a defensive standpoint, and if he can do it more consistently, that is when I would start advocating more for Kuminga. And there was another play where somebody missed a shot in that second half, and Guy Santos, of course, was able to tap the ball out for an offensive rebound. The ball goes out to Jonathan Kuminga, and he's able to find a relocating Steph Curry coming into the corner, and Curry ends up draining the 3. Those are the kind of connective plays that Kuminga must be able to consistently make to be considered good enough to be a part of a playoff or a championship caliber team. And there was even a play where he ended up tipping the ball out for the Warriors for an offensive rebound opportunity. And that's the kind of Guy Santos stuff that you're looking for out of a guy like Kuminga who can jump out of the gym. He has to take advantage of that, and he has to be able to hustle to his max ability, because that is the kind of play that helps a team become a title contending team. The more guys you have in rotation that are able to make plays like that, the more powerful the Warriors can become. So from that standpoint, it was very encouraging to see Kuminga capable of doing those things. I would say this was probably one of his best overall games since returning from his ankle sprain. Unfortunately, to close the game is a completely different story. Steve Kerr elected to close this game with a lineup of Steph Curry, Podz, Kuminga, Butler, and Draymond, and that, I am sorry to say, is not good enough, because Kuminga ended up not doing a chunk of the fundamental things that he needed to do to be worthy of a closing caliber player. It takes a lot to be a closing caliber player for a team trying to play like a championship caliber team. In tonight's game, he played like a player who is not good enough to be on a playoff caliber team. Forget championship caliber, even on a playoff caliber level. Like, you have to persistently look to make winning plays, and there were just too many times where he broke the team on both ends of the floor, on both offense and defense. Defensively, there were multiple possessions in succession, actually, where his fundamental understanding of defense was just completely off. Like, he'll be guarding Rui Hachimura, who's standing in the corner, and he just kind of stays parked there. Hey, if a shot goes up and a pass is not made to Rui Hachimura, who's in the corner, you have to come in and crash the glass immediately, because your team, as small as it is, with just Draymond and Jimmy Butler, that is not enough. All 3 forwards have to attack the glass when the game is on the line in the final 3-4 minutes, in clutch minutes. You have to do it. And then there was another play where Steph Curry ended up in a mismatch right under the rim, and Kuminga's just watching it happen. You have to understand the game and understand when somebody has a mismatch, and you have to understand the timing of having to rotate and then trusting that the rest of your teammates are going to rotate to your man if necessary. You guys are never going to see or understand these kinds of things if you're just looking at the stat sheet. It will never tell you what happened in the final 3-4 minutes of the game. And then another possession comes and he's overhelping and doubling on LeBron James way too early. And then Rui Hachimura ends up getting a wide open dunk at the rim. These are the things that can never happen for a playoff contending team and a championship caliber team. Can never happen in the closing minutes when you're trying to win a game. Meanwhile, on the offensive end of the floor, he's just slipping every screen and you're getting Steph Curry into trouble. In order to make sure that Steph Curry has enough room to operate on whatever switches and whatever play that the Warriors are trying to execute, you have to make contact. Make sure that you are creating contact if you are the screener. And Kuminga is basically just trapping Steph Curry with the game imbalance. These things cannot happen. And then there's another play where they're out in transition late in the game. Podz gets it to a wide open Jonathan Kuminga and he's just kind of pivoting and hesitating, and then the defense recovers and then he throws up a whack shot. It should have been a dunk from the get-go and he ends up missing the layup, and then the Lakers are out in transition. Another play that just cannot happen with the game in balance. Ultimately what that showed me is that Kuminga is not ready to be a closing caliber player for this team, even though from an overall standpoint, he had a really good game. I don't know why Steve Kerr elected to close the game with Kuminga, despite seeing those defensive lapses in the final 4-3 minutes of the game. So I would say ultimately that is on Steve Kerr for failing to make the necessary adjustments to go to winning players who know how to win the game when it's time to win the game. So two things can be true at once. Kuminga, from an all-around overall standpoint in this game, was mostly very good. Very good plays, very connected. And the stat sheet will tell you he had a great overall game. 18 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists. That's very good production from a statistical standpoint. At the same time, he was a lot more of a detriment to close this game than helpful. He did get 4 points in that crunch time, and those were useful points, but being able to score those points is useless if you're just giving it right back on the other end of the floor. It's imperative that the Warriors are able to find the right combinations and the right role for Jonathan Kuminga for this team, because he can literally make or break this team. That's how important of a role that he has to play for this team because of the amount of minutes and opportunity he gets for this team. So if he's playing 24 plus minutes for this team off the bench, that's half the game. So in the half of the game that he plays, the level that he plays is going to determine the overall viability of this team, believe it or not. And that's why I am so gung-ho about this situation, because I understand what his play means to this team for this team. But again, looking at the standings, the Warriors are now 1 game back from the Lakers, and they're just 1.5 games back from the Nuggets for that 4th seed. So the Warriors will play the Nuggets tomorrow. Hopefully, Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry are feeling okay from what happened tonight, and they're good to go for tomorrow. And they're going to try to accomplish something very difficult for this game, because the Nuggets intentionally sat out a bunch of guys in the previous game. So their starters are getting extra rest coming into this game and extra fresh. So a daunting task in front of the Warriors tomorrow. Especially, again, if they're going to go with this small unit, they're going to get overwhelmed by the size of the Nuggets. We'll see what happens. But at the very least, they took care of business tonight in this game. Winning this game was paramount, so it is absolutely amazing they were able to get the job done. Austin Reaves was ridiculous in this game in that 4th quarter, late in that 4th quarter. The sequences were just insane. Steph Curry hits a 3-point shot. LeBron James comes right back, hits a 3-point shot. Podz comes right back, hits a step back 3-point shot, the clutchest shot of his career, by the way. Oh, and I did forget to say, from an overall standpoint, Brandin Podziemski had a career game. 28 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 8 of 10 from the 3-point line. Absolutely off the wall, incredible shooting. You guys remember in the beginning of the season when he couldn't hit the side of a barn and was basically shooting like 20% from the 3-point line? And if you've been following me long enough, the one thing that I did have trust in was that his 3-point shot would at some point equalize and come back to closer to what it was last season when he shot close to 40%. And he's found unbelievable confidence from a shooting standpoint. And I think going forward, Brandin has the potential to be shooting close to something like 40% from the 3-point line. And that completely changes the dynamic of what kind of player he is. Because obviously part of the problem in the early going was that he couldn't hit the side of a barn. And well, if you can't shoot and you're not really a point guard, well, what is Podz's role going to be for this team? And all of that changes when he can shoot the three-point shot to the extent that he's been shooting it. But yes, it is marvelous to see the Warriors take care of 2 playoff teams in a row, the Grizzlies and now the Lakers, and we'll see what happens tomorrow against the Nuggets. Thank you so much for watching as always. Until next time.